All right, we'll get started in about 1 minute. Can you see my screen?
It's a
Yeah.
little fuzzy to
Yeah, it's a
me.
little blurry, but
Is it better?
a little
It's
bit.
better, bigger, yes.
Yeah, the words are bigger, so it's clear, more clear. You can see it more
Can
clearly.
you see my screen? Okay, hold
Yes.
on.
It's a
Yeah.
little fuzzy.
Yeah, let me try this one more time. All right, thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to Business Sales. Tonight we have Nikki Cox with the IRS, and she is going to do the presentation on closing a business. And thank you so much, Nikki, for doing this. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you, Deborah, and hello, everybody. I work for the IRS in communications as a stakeholder liaison covering the states of Nebraska and South Dakota. And I am going to cover your federal tax obligations when closing, some of the steps that you need to take. You don't have to be a real good note taker because most of this can be found on irs.gov, and then just enter closing a business in the search box and you'll have a more in-depth reference to look back to. So moving on to the second slide. These are the steps that I'm going to cover. The first of which is filing a final return and related forms on the year that you close. Also taking care of your employees by depositing your payroll taxes and a couple of other things. Obviously paying the tax that you owe, and reporting payments that you have made to contract workers. Also canceling your employer identification number or EIN. Some of you know this better as your business's federal ID number. How long to keep records afterwards. Let's go on to the third slide here, and I'm going to break these steps down a little bit more for you. So you'll file a different final form depending on the type of business entity you are. It's not going to be much different though than the forms that you have filed in the past. For instance, if you're a landlord, you'll file a Schedule E. If you're a farmer, you're going to file a Schedule F. If you're another type of sole proprietor, you'll file a Schedule C like you've done in the past. You may also need to file up to 3 other forms when you file your individual tax return if you're a sole proprietor, landlord, or farmer. For instance, Form 4797 is the IRS form for sell a business property. For each year that you sell or exchange property used in your business. You will also need to file this form if you're closing your business, and this causes the business use of an eligible property under section 179 to drop to 50% or less. You might also be looking at filing a form 8594. That's the IRS form for asset acquisition statement if you sell your business. There's also, since you're self-employed, you'll be looking at that Schedule SE for self-employment if you have net earnings of $400 or more for your business. Now, if you're a partnership, as usual, you have to file your form 1065, which is the IRS form for U.S. return of partnership income for the year that you closed your business. When you file, you have to report any capital gains and losses on your Schedule D for a 1065. And then you're going to want to check the final return box. It's near the top of the front page of the return below the name and address. And then you're also going to want to check the final K1 box on Schedule K1, which is the form for partner share of income deductions credits. You may also need to file up to 2 other forms with your form 1065. Again, we're looking at that form 4797, which is the IRS form for sale of business property. For each year your partnership sells or exchanges property uses in your business. And then you also need to file this form if closing your business causes use of an eligible property under section 179 to drop to 50% or less. With a partnership, you also might be looking at filing the form 8595, which is asset acquisition statement if you sell your business. Now, if you're a corporation, you must file form 966, which is corporate dissolution or liquidation, if you adopt a resolution or plan to dissolve the corporation or liquidate any of its stock. You also have to file your corporation's final income tax return. And on this return, like the partnership, just remember to check the final return box, which is near the top of the front page of the return below the name and address. Now, for a C corporation, you're going to want to file a form 1120, which is the IRS form for corporate income tax returns for the year you close the business. And you're going to want to report any capital gains and losses on the attached Schedule D for a form 1120. If you're an S corporation, instead of an 1120, you're going to want to file an 1120S for the year you close the business. Again, report any capital gains on that affiliated Schedule D. Check off the final K1, box on Schedule K1. And then regardless of the type of corporation you are, you might also need to file 2 other forms when you file your form 1120 or 1120S. The first is that form 4797 for sales of business property. And then the second form is the 8594, that asset acquisition statement. Moving on to the 4th slide. You want to take care of your employees in the way of employment taxes and pension or benefit plans. As far as employment taxes, if you have 1 or more employees, you have to pay them any final wages and compensation owed. You also have to make final federal tax deposits and report employment taxes. If you don't withhold or deposit employee income, Social Security, and Medicare taxes, the trust fund recovery penalty may apply. If you've never heard of the trust fund recovery penalty, it's pretty scary. IRS can charge up to 200% of whatever the tax is owed, and they can pierce the corporate veil on this one. So you don't want to get caught up with that. To report employment taxes, you may need to file a couple of forms. The first is the Form 941, which is your employer quarterly federal tax return, or Form 944, the employer's annual federal tax return for the quarter in which you make your final wage payments. You want to check the box to tell the IRS your business is closed on that form and enter the date final wages are paid on line 17 of Form 941 or form line 14 of Form 944. You're also going to want to attach a statement to the return showing the name of the person keeping the payroll records and the address where those records will be kept. Also, Form 940, employer's annual federal unemployment or FUTA tax return for the calendar year. You want to file that for the year in which you paid final wages. You're going to want to check the box D as in dog in the type of return section to show that the form is final. You also have to give a W-2 to each of your employees for the calendar year in which you pay them for their final wages. And you're going to want to give that W-2 to your employers by the due date of your final Form 941 or Form 944. You don't want to wait until the end of the year unless that's when you're closing. Generally, you furnish copies B, C, and 2 to the employees, and you're going to want to file Form W3. That's the summary form for all of your W2s to transmit them to Social Security. If your employees, if they receive tips, you're going to want to file a Form 8027, which is IRS employer's annual information return of tip income and allocated tips. And that's to report tip and allocated tips. Now, as far as pensions or benefit plans, if you provide a pension or a benefit plan for your employees, you want to see how to terminate a retirement plan. If you provide health savings accounts or similar programs for your employees, you're going to want to pull up the IRS publication 969, which is called Health Savings Accounts and Other Tax Favored Health Plans. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if you go to that irs.gov page for closing your business, you'll find links to all of these publications. Moving on to slide 5. Now, if you want to pay the taxes you owe to the IRS, which hopefully you do, and you have, then I'm just want to let you know you have a lot of ways to pay us, all the way from direct pay to cash, believe it or not. So if you're not familiar with some of the other methods, even if you're not closing your business, it's kind of interesting to check out. Go to irs.gov and then in the search box, do a search for make a payment, and it'll give you details about all of the different ways that you can pay the IRS. Moving on to the 6th slide. If you have paid any contractors at least $600 for services, and this includes parts and materials during the calendar year in which you closed your business, you're going to have to report the forms forms 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation and form 1096, which is a summary of all of those 1099 NECs added together. And some companies will not be able to submit that form 1096 by paper. They'll be required to submit those to the IRS electronically. Moving on to the 7th slide. Finally, if you're going to want to ask IRS to cancel your employer identification number or EIN after you filed all the necessary returns and paid all the taxes owed, make sure you wait until those are both done, because IRS cannot close out an account until then. So to do that, what you'll want to do is listed here on the slide. You're going to send a letter to IRS, no street address, just Cincinnati, Ohio 45999. And in the letter, you're going to make sure that you include a complete legal name of the business and the business EIN, business address, reason that you want the IRS to close the account. And if you by chance kept the notice that the IRS sent you when we assigned your EIN, you should include a copy of that with your EIN cancellation letter. Moving on to slide 8. Finally, in case of an audit with the IRS, you want to hold on to your records. There's other reasons to hold on to them. There's a link on the irs.gov page called "How long should I keep a record?" The link to that page is actually on the closing a business page to take you there if you don't remember what the page is called. But for property records, generally you want to keep records relating to the property until the period of limitations expires for the year in which you dispose, meaning sell the property or get rid of it. The period of limitations is the period of time in which you can amend your tax return to claim a credit or refund, or the IRS can assess additional tax. For employment tax records, you want to keep them for at least 4 years after the date that the tax becomes due or paid, whichever is later. And then for other records, you're going to want to, in general, keep records for 3 years as long as you didn't file worthless securities or bad debt deductions, or for the years that you just completely didn't file an associated tax return, you're going to want to hold on to those records longer. And well, if you filed a fraudulent tax return, IRS can go back forever. So you'll want to, assuming that you intentionally did that, then you would want to hold on to those records forever that go along with it. In general, you want to keep records for 3 years from the date that you filed your original return, or 2 years from the date that you paid the tax, whichever is later. If you file a claim or credit or refund after you file your tax return, then you're going to want to use that as your latest filing date. I am seeing some new information about the ERC that IRS, we're extending the statute on those to 5 years. So if you claim the ERC for your business, you're going to want to hold on to those records for 5 years instead of 3 years. Now moving on to worthless securities. If you filed a claim for a loss from worthless securities or a bad debt deduction, you want to hold on to those records longer, 7 years. And then if you intentionally did not report more than 25% of your gross income on your tax returns, you want to keep your records for 6 years on that. And as I kind of hinted at earlier, if you intentionally filed a fraudulent return, IRS can go back forever. So always good to file that last tax return. If you didn't file a tax return at all, then the clock hasn't started ticking on those, and again, IRS can keep on. The IRS can go back forever to audit those. So again, make sure you file those last tax returns. Slide 9, the last slide. So here's a list of the resources to get them easier. I would go to irs.gov and enter the words "closing a business" instead of that first link there that says irs.gov/closing a biz. That first link there just does not work anymore. So You'll find most of these listed resources on our closing a business page. So that's all I got. Deborah, do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, Nikki. Does anyone have any questions? Let me check on YouTube. I don't have any questions here, and um, I'm checking on social media. YouTube. Okay. Did we lose anyone? Looks like it's okay.
We might have lost one person.
Okay, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Interesting.
All right.
Well,
Well, thanks, Deborah, and thanks, everybody. Deborah, I'll let you close out.
all right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I hope you got some useful information on closing a business. And unfortunately, there are so many minority-owned businesses that don't last more than a year, and they don't have the proper procedures to close a business. And like Nikki said, if they don't file the correct forms, then I mean, how do you, is it Uncle Ben? They might have problems with, the
Yeah, they might
IRS.
have problems.
Mhm. So not just the fact that they're closing within a year and not having a successful business, and then after that having troubles with the IRS is not fun. So this meeting has been recorded, and I'll post the recording later on social media if you know anyone in that situation. And Neki also has posted her contact information in the chat box. Feel free to reach out to her. She is very responsive. She will get back to you no matter what. So she's a great resource, and we're happy to have her.
Happy
If
to
there
be
are
invited.
no if there are no other questions, next month we are with the SBA, Small Business Administration, on no, not I think, yeah, next month is with the SBA on SBA certifications, and then in November we are with the Department of Transportation with the DBA certifications, and then in December we are back with NECICAT. So we'll be posting everything on our social media pages, and it also on our website. You can register from going to the website directly as well. If there are still no questions, I'll just wish you a good night, happy Monday, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you, Nikki. Thanks, everyone. Kennedy,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.